Thank you, Angie. We were made to rise. We were made to rise and rise strong. And so now's the time for us to be that radiant light, to bring our light into our family of humanity, the light of our own life, the light of our close family, and this human family. And so I want to ask everyone to pass your cards into the center aisle. No matter where you're sitting, get them into the center aisle so the greeters can bring them up and give them to Dr. Petra. And again, all month we've been talking about this family from fantasy to freedom. And today we want to talk about our human family. We want to focus on the family of humanity and to realize that how we're showing up is somewhat a fantasy of we're all one, that we're all the same. There's this thought of this fantasy that we have, and we've been working. What happens when we have a fantasy? It's not that we have to let it go, but we have to look it in the face and say, is this real or is this a fantasy? A fantasy of that we're all living our ideal experience right now. There's a fantasy, perhaps, that in this human family that I get to be about me and only about me. That I live in a vacuum and that all I need to do is be concerned with my aspect of my life, and that's called independence, that I'm independent. Well, we've got to move from fantasy, some aspects of the fantasy within humanity, into freedom. And we want to do that together. And when we acknowledge that not everyone is living in this fantasy, then we begin to look at it, we begin to face it, we're free from the illusion of it, and we begin to actually do our work. And this work is crucial, and this work is critical for the sake of our human family. We get to let go of any kind of false beliefs, anything that we might be holding that is keeping us from what is real and true about our human family, because what's real and true is one can't be free unless we're all free. You see, you not being free brings my freedom down. It does. Because when we're all not free, then when there is not a freedom for someone, then what can happen is we attempt to get our freedom some other way. And this lack of freedom creates fear. It perpetuates fear. It brings in anger and hatred. It brings in violence. It brings in bombs. It brings in everything. Because that which we do to the other, we fully do to ourselves. It's like we're all in this one tree of life, and we cannot separate a limb from that tree. We cannot separate a branch. We cannot even separate a leaf on this one human family tree. One of the things that we talk about a lot in our classes, and we're exploring this in a class I'm currently teaching, that unity does not mean uniformity. Ernest Holmes tells us unity does not mean uniformity, so I can't expect you to be just like me. And when any of us have the requirement that we want to be around people and you must look like me or act the same way or have the same religious belief or the faith or anything like this, there's actually no freedom in that. And so as we are approaching Independence Day, we thought it would be really good to look at this and celebrate the freedom, that it is something for us to talk about. So true freedom has to be for all of us. It must be for all of us. And the paradox, and what our faith, our philosophy teaches, is that the only way true freedom and true independence works is on this spiritual context of oneness. It's the way it only works is on this context of oneness, that you are a part of me, and yet you don't have to be like me. That's the paradox. While I have the freedom to be me, I don't have the freedom to hurt you, because freedom is not license. And so to start off with what is up in our community, and this whole thing right now called humanity and our family of humanity, while Peter's been looking at this, I wanted to start off with something that I've been grappling with, questions I've been grappling with for some time, and this week it just really came up for me yet again. I got so angry and so despondent, and I can't even imagine, I just cannot imagine, tired of being tired, tired of being angry, tired of being in the situation that I'm not, but I got so angry about what's happening to people of color in our country, and especially black men right now. Not like it's right now, but it came up again for me this week. And I went to Dr. Petra, and I shared this with her, and the first thing she said in this was, find the spiritual truth and be causal. And it was and is a profound conversation. And so I wanted to start with that. Find the spiritual truth and be causal. And this that I'm grappling with, what is that?
I don't know. Am I
Yep.
on? There we go. Thank you. Yeah. So this is the conversation we had a couple of days ago, and Karen was really upset. She was really. It's really true. She was really angry, really upset, and the challenge with that is when we're that angry and upset is that we move into the ain't it awful conversation. Ain't it awful? Ain't it awful what they're doing? Ain't it awful what's happening? Ain't it awful that nobody cares? Ain't it awful about the media? Ain't it awful? Ain't it awful? Ain't it awful? Problem with the ain't it awful consciousness is that it perpetuates that which is happening by contributing to it with fear and negativity. And so the only way that I know of is how to cut through the ain't it awful conversation is to ask the question, what is the spiritual truth? Well, the spiritual truth is each and every human being is a divine emanation, a divine incarnation of love and light. Every single human being. That is the spiritual truth, including the black men that Karen was feeling so enraged for. That is the spiritual truth. Unfortunately, sitting around saying ain't it awful, doesn't do anything. And it contributes to the negativity in consciousness about that it's terrible. And that ain't it awful continues to hold it in place. The move after what's the spiritual truth is how do I be causal? How do I be causal? Well, this is what we know in the science of mind. How we are causal is we go to consciousness first. And what we do in consciousness is we see that truth outpictured. And when we see that truth outpictured, we become causal. So we see in our mind's eye equality. We see in our mind's eye that every life matters. We see in our mind's eye the systemic changes that are required so that it is true that black lives, in fact, matter. We see that in our mind's eye. And by seeing that in our mind's eye, We stop seeing and stop adding energy to ain't it awful, and we add consciousness and deliberate intentionality and energy to the world that we wish to see and the world that we envision, which is actually a world that works for everyone. And do you see, it's precisely the technology that we use in our own personal lives. When we see a pattern, when we see a behavior, when we see something that is happening over and over and over and over again, right? We stop saying, ain't it awful that my relationship doesn't work? Ain't it awful that I keep losing my job? Ain't it awful? Ain't it awful? Ain't it awful? And we say, what's the intention that I'm going to set? What's the consciousness I'm going to hold? I'm going to be causal in life. And then, out of that place of causal consciousness, we step forward. And the path rises up to meet us, doesn't it? We step out in faith. I may not know how to act out of this causal truth, but I know that it is true, and I know my consciousness is causal. And so now I move in the world from that place, which is a very different place than moving in the world from fear, anger, despair, or denial. And we can do any and all of those things when we are caught in the human condition. Ernest Holmes says we don't deny the human condition. We look a fact in the face, and we deny its spiritual validity. We don't turn away from the facts, but we deny its spiritual validity, that there is anything okay about this, that there's nothing in alignment with spiritual truth about this. And as we see that and stand in that place, do you see, we become causal. When we're in the ain't it awful swirl, we are at the mercy of the human condition. And we are right in that swirl along with everybody else. Our job is to raise ourselves out of that and find that firm spiritual ground. What is the spiritual truth, and how can I be causal? And then, of course, what we teach, treat and move your feet. Right? We do our causal work in consciousness, and then our individual movement, activity, action, whether it's prayer, marching, voting, being involved in a cause, whatever it is, comes out of that causal place. I do this to cause the end result that I see in my consciousness, not because I'm afraid, or because I'm angry at you, or because I want to make you wrong, or because I think you're not doing it right, but because I see the truth, and I am out picturing that truth in the best way that I know how. Do you see that? That gives us a place to stand and a place to move. I know there's a lot to go through. You can see there's lots and lots up. We are weeding through anything that's personal, and we won't be able to address that this morning. That we won't be addressing personal questions about your own personal life. This is really, we didn't want to just assume that there were things up for you and just start launching into some conversations. We actually wanted to hear what was in the room and see if we could address it from a spiritual point of view.
Okay, someone's asking, why do we need to talk about political topics here at CSLDallas? Most of us do not come here to hear about political topics.
Yeah.
There's a whole stack of political things here.
This is why we talk about these topics.
She just messed up my sword.
I know. Sorry. Okay. And so the challenge, of course, is that we hear the conversation with political ears.
Yes.
Right? And so I'm going to invite you not to hear it as a political conversation. My promise, Karen and my promise, is we will never stand up here on this platform and tell you how to vote or who to vote for. We will never tell you what political party to be involved in, and we will never tell you what referendum you should or shouldn't vote for, unlike other spiritual leaders in other spiritual traditions. We will actually not do that. Our job is to teach us how to think and how to engage in the challenges of our life. We do this every time we sit down and we say, wow, you know, family of origin issues are a real issue, a lot. I hear it a lot in counseling. I hear it a lot in prayer. We should do a whole month on family of origin. We need to talk about how to manifest in our lives, because I hear a lot of people talking about they want to create their own business. They want to move out of the corporate world and be entrepreneurs. We better do a whole month on how do you manifest and how are you successful. Do you see? That's our job, is to bring our science of mind teachings to the challenges and issues of life. And based on the number of cards and the number of questions and the number of conversations I'm guessing that you're having with your friends and family, this is an issue we're all grappling with. How do we bring our spiritual walk, our spiritual teachings, into this challenge? And our spiritual teachings do provide us with values. Our spiritual teaching tells us things about the universe to which if we seek to practice our spiritual teachings, to which we seek to align ourselves with. And then, as you know, each and every one of us go and express that in our own unique way, just as we go and express our own individual lives. And so part of the reason why we're doing this as a Q&A is to really hear what's up with you guys around all of this, so that we're addressing the actual issues and not the issues that we perceive someone might have. But I think we would be doing spiritual malpractice if we didn't address the challenges that we are collectively facing from a spiritual point of view. I don't know about you, but I need help remembering it. I need help finding that place to stand. I talk to our practitioners and to people in this community that help me remember truth and find that place to stand. And I believe that that's what our job is, and that that's what we're doing. So I really invite you to release the idea that it's a political conversation, and recognize that it is a conversation about who we are and how we show up as spiritual beings in our human family and in what's going on today. Quite frankly, we've had this conversation at our core council. I've been in the ministry 35 years, and I've never experienced the way in which the cultural climate is impacting our community. And I don't mean just ours, I mean every community everywhere. I've never experienced it before, how it's impacting people's lives. And yeah, and we're in this together. So that's why we're exploring it this morning.
So this person's on a spiritual awakening, and my family is not on board or supportive. What do you do? How do you stay focused?
So, okay. Oh man, am I really going to say this out loud? So who cares if they're not on board? Really? Are we bound by what people think about us? No. Are we going to have our lives designed because someone else thinks a certain way and we don't? No. We are here to learn how to be ourselves. And that includes saying what's so for us and not requiring approval or agreement. Do you see, that question means I feel like I don't belong. And my heart hurts, and I want to belong. And it actually means what I really want is I want you to agree with me, because I think you're wrong. So you should agree with me, and then we'll all be happy. Now, this does not mean you have to take abusive conversation. This does not mean you have to be in a situation where you truly feel either attacked or shut down. We don't need, I mean, it does mean that we have to learn how to say what our faith teaches us. When statements are made and they are not in alignment with what you understand spiritual truth and how you see spiritual truth to seek to be outpictured in the world, I believe if we are to be a light in the world, it is actually our job to shine that light out. I'm simply a candle in the dark when I do that. I'm simply lighting my candle. My candle does not have to fight with yours. My candle doesn't have to overpower yours. I'm simply lighting my candle. Do you see? And so we have this incessant need for our family's approval. I would let it go. And when there's an opening, I would invite us all to have the courage and strength to step into it. Not combatively, not, oh, let me trade Bible verses with you because I have some that prove my point. But this is what my faith teaches me. My faith teaches me we're all one. My faith teaches me every single person is a child of God. My faith teaches me it's important to look at the patterns. And when we look at our own patterns, we see ways that we're behaving that maybe are not in alignment with what we believe to be spiritually true or who we want to be grown up. And so my spiritual faith teaches me that, yeah, it's really important for us to look at our collective hidden beliefs, our collective false ideas about people who are different than us, about black people or immigrant people or Muslims or women or LGBT people. We want to learn to see them and these situations with clear eyes, not clouded by false beliefs and false assumptions and false ideas. Do you see? And so we look at it. We look clearly at it. Just like we want to look at ourselves. We actually want our false ideas and those insidious patterns, we actually want them to arise. We just don't want the embarrassment of looking at them, do we? You know, Karen and I are doing this right now. We are well into our storming phase. It's very much fun because basically what we're doing is we're showing up as all the relationships we've been in the past, right? And all the ways that we've behaved that, you know, is not necessarily so pretty. But we have consciousness, right? We have consciousness where then all of a sudden, you know, we'll go, oh, I think I'm seeking your approval. Oh, right, I forgot that I could ask for what I wanted. Oh, I'm not used to that. Do you see what I'm saying? And our own pattern we become aware of it and we go, oh shit, I didn't really want to act that way, but oh, here I am, okay, right? And it's embarrassing and it's uncomfortable and we don't want to do it, and yet that's how we move through it. And then we say, well, what's the spiritual truth? The spiritual truth is love, the spiritual truth is truthfulness, the spiritual truth is connection, whatever, and I'm going to be causal, so I'm going to not behave according to my pattern, I'm going to be causal and behave according to my spiritual truth. Well, what we do in this family, we're doing in the collective family. It's exactly the same thing. And so we allow those patterns to arise, and we seek to look at them without shame or blame, without shame or blame, but by taking personal responsibility that this pattern is arising in our collective consciousness, that this thought is arising in our collective consciousness. And how do we stand, or that we should stand then in the place that's actually aligned with our spiritual truth?
Yeah. So I saw a beautiful example of this because we have collectively continued patterns and beliefs, and sometimes we're aware of them or not. But when we become aware, everything changes. And I recently saw, yesterday in fact, a beautiful video of these pastors, Christian pastors, who finally decided that they were holding whatever beliefs they had of homosexuals, LGBT people, based upon what they heard their pastor say from all the years when they were young and what they, learned in divinity school. It didn't matter where, but each of them were telling their stories of how they had just taken on the patterns, taken on the beliefs, and believed them, and were perpetuating that in their ministry for however long. And yet for each of them, there became a moment where they said, well, why don't I check out my now belief, my belief, and discern? And everything shifted for them, and they're like, oh my gosh, this isn't true. The spiritual truth is not this. And they move from that place. And so in any place within humanity, when we discover that, consciously or not, we have picked up a pattern and are perpetuating it, when we come to that place of doing our own personal work, we don't take that into humanity anymore.
And you see, and Karen and I actually talked about that, and we said, it might be that those pastors were interested in doing that research because, well, they met an LGBT person. They had them in their family or in their congregation. They heard about it on the news. They saw people. Somebody was willing to speak to them or show themselves, not in a, you're wrong, I'm going to beat you over the head with it, but here I am. Here's my light. Here's my truth. Here's who I am. And the invitation is then to, the hope is that there's an awakening, right? And in these three pastors, there's an awakening. And so even in our families where we feel so challenged, it's not about getting into the argument with them, but it is about shining our light, being who we are, and allowing that to speak and to make an invitation to explore these underlying patterns.
So someone wants to know, how do we listen without judgment, without judging, and being open to learn from others of different mindsets?
How do we learn to listen? We actually have to be interested. Curious. And, it starts with that thing. Karen talked about it 2 weeks ago. I talked it about again last week. Can we actually see that the person sitting in front of us is a child of God? And they are the incarnation of the divine, and the truth is they're doing the best they can. The challenge that I think we fall into is that we believe that listening implies agreement, so we're afraid to listen. And we believe that listening, well, I don't know that we believe it. Certainly we can experience listening as a taking on of emotion. And so we can't let it in. And the way that we let it in, the way that we keep it out is by being judgmental. So one of the things we have to do is learn how to listen without taking on. I'm constantly struggling with this, given the family I grew up in. I'm hugely energetically sensitive, massively energetically sensitive, and I grew up in an energetically volatile household. So what I learned how to do was to shut the energy out, because I didn't know how to be with it without taking it on. So I learned to shut it out, close it off, protect, energetically protect. And that's what we do. We can, especially if we are spiritually sensitive, energetically sensitive, is we take it on and then we push it away, right? Listening, and I can only speak from what I seek to learn myself. Listening is allowing it to be here so that it can be engaged with. Do you see? And we don't want to be judgmental. But do you see, judgmental means I don't say, well, you're a bad and stupid person for thinking that. This does not mean that I can't have discernment and say, I do not actually believe that that's an appropriate way to extrapolate spiritual truth or behavior. We can actually be discerning. And it is absolutely okay to disagree. It's completely appropriate and okay to disagree with someone's point of view. What non-judgmental means is I don't judge your personhood for the point of view that you have. And this is one of the critical issues that's going on in our country today. This volatile rhetoric that isn't about ideas, it isn't about solutions, it's about whether or not you're patriotic or stupid or the epithets and the adjectives that are attached to people's names and to activities. Do you see? That's what causes it to fall over into the personhood. I'm judging your personhood. And if we can do anything, if we can contribute in any way to what's healing the divisiveness today, it would be to pay attention to our rhetoric. Pay attention to our words. Left, right, center, independent, not attached. I don't care who you are. I don't care what side of the spectrum you stand on. I don't care who you're talking to. Do you see that it's that volatile, it's that place where we begin to equate ideas and ways of behaving with personhood. That's what it means to be judgmental. I want to separate that out. But it doesn't mean that we can't disagree with someone's ideas. We can't disagree with the way in which someone understands how they're unfolding it. We absolutely can. And that invites us then into a dialogue, right? Ultimately, the dialogue brings us to, it's not my way or your way. There's a larger way, there's a larger understanding that we seek that allows us to actually move forward together. We can't get to that third way unless we're willing to both listen and speak. Both sides of that are needed.
Okay, here's an easy one. How do we reduce poverty radically in Dallas and DFW?
Join a charitable organization that is working with it. Do the work in consciousness. There is enough for everybody, right? We have to be causal. We have to be causal. We have to see the world that we want to live in. We have to see the world that we want everybody to live in. We have to see that out. We have to see that. We just talked about this in our class, Sunday morning class. Ernest Holmes says, faith is the ability to look into the void. Faith is the ability to look into the infinite and not see a void, but see a solid reality. Faith is the ability to look into the infinite, look into the absolute, look into the divine, look into that which is not the human condition, but to look into that and to not see a void, but to see solid reality, to see the reality of there is enough for everyone, to see the reality that there is enough food and enough good for everyone. And do you see, when we do that, we become causal. Now, that place of being causal invites us to begin to move in whatever direction or whatever activity we are guided to do. There's to contribute to the solution of the problem in the human condition. And right, this is the spiritual double vision. We have to see abundance. If we keep seeing, oh my God, there's only poverty, and I've heard people say this, we'll never fix it. And then you're right, we'll never fix it. We actually have to have a mental equivalent in our own consciousness of abundance. Everybody having enough. That's the place we start, and then we move from there. And we find places to engage and things to do, holding that as the outpicturing that we're moving toward.
But I love the song that Angie sang, because she talked about being this brilliant light, and for us to be this army of love. Mm-hmm. This army of love. Love is the greatest power there is, and nothing can stand against it. It sweeps through everything, and I am constantly taking up that spiritual practice that I've done since 2010. How can I be love in the world? And there are times on social media or in emails or in conversation or in a restaurant with a stranger or on a highway or whatever that it is easy for me to slip in and to be a part of, I'm reading this book, but to be a part of this God's land of anger. Well, we can be that army of love. And that article was written in 1994, God's Land of Anger. It's 2017. And we, in our faith and how we take it up with spiritual principles as we focused on today, and it's on every single one of your hearts that put something on a piece of paper, or a mass majority, of the divisiveness, of the anger, of the how do I stand solidly in this time. And the way we do is we actually talk to one another. We want to know what's happening in someone's life that we may not be aware of. Be willing to have a difficult conversation, not just with us, but with every single person in this community.
Yeah, and be a place of love, right? We've raised many of us here in this room have raised children. Love. Love is not always sweet, but it is always kind. Love is not always soft. It is always truthful. Love is not always the same, but it is always connecting. Do you see? Our job is to be the light. Every moment that we possibly can, in every situation, to be the light, to bring the light, not to not speak, not to refuse to listen, but to stand in love and to believe beyond the shadow of a doubt that when we stand in that causal place in consciousness and do out of that whatever we are guided and compelled to do, that we are contributing to the spiritual awakening of humanity in a world that works for everyone.
Yeah, so I'm going to read 3 of them and then ask Petra to move us into prayer. This is from our global vision. And it says, we envision a world in which we live and grow as one global family that respects and honors the interconnectedness of all life, a world where this kinship with all life prospers and connects through the guidance of spiritual wisdom and experience. We envision a world where personal responsibility joins with social conscience in every area of the political, corporate, academic, and social sectors, providing sustainable structures to further the emerging global consciousness. We envision a world where each and every person has enough food, a home, and a sense of belonging, a world of peace and harmony, enfranchisement, and justice. We envision a worldwide culture where forgiveness, whether for errors, injustices, or debts, is the norm. We envision a world that works for everyone and for all of creation. And so we are called to be that army of love, to rise strong in our own life for the sake of everyone around us and for our human family. If not us, who? If not, when? Or if not now, when? And so, let's be that army of love.
So let us pray. And as we move into prayer, what we do is we move into that causal state. We move into that causal state that is outside of the human condition, that is beyond human fear, it is that place where the infinite lies stretched in smiling repose. The powerful presence of love and joy. The absolute quality of peace and wholeness. We call it God. And we recognize that that life, that one infinite reality, God, is flowing through all creation. Creation is the logical and necessary outcome of Spirit's reflection upon itself, its own joy and love and beauty and power made manifest in a form through which it expresses, incarnates into physical flesh and blood and life and bone, stone and flower, river and tree. And so as we know this truth, we move into this causal moment where we recognize that as we declare truth, the universal law responds to that truth. We turn our eyes away from the human condition. We turn our hearts away from the fear. We move our consciousness away from the doubt. And we align ourselves, mind, heart, body and soul, spirit, with the truth that God is present in every aspect of creation. That God is present in every life, be it mineral, vegetable, animal, or human. And that that sacred life is deserving of our respect and our care. Because in that, we are loving God. And so this morning we affirm and declare that each and every one of us are guided by that love. and that there is something within us that knows what is ours to do. There is something within us that knows what is ours to say. There is that divine impulsion of love and truth within each and every one of us that knows precisely who we came here to be. And so this morning we dispel any idea within ourselves of confusion, of anxiousness, or of fear. Because the truth is God is present, and love is working in the world. And we make ourselves that place where the light shines and love grows. And because we do this, we know that the law answers this truth by mirroring it into the world. So we call it forth. We call forth the very thing we seek by being it ourselves. In this we are a blessing. Lives are lifted. Truth is revealed. Old patterns are released, and humanity awakens to its spiritual magnificence. In this prayer, we claim this as the causal truth. We will be unshakable in our vision of this truth, and we demand that the universe responds. And so with perfect faith and confidence, now we can move in the world because the prayer is done. There's nothing to fear, only the step to take, guided, guarded, and directed by that wisdom of that infinite reality. We can let it go now in perfect faith and trust. We can let it be, and together we say, and so it is.